you got to learn how to tell the customers no. That's the biggest thing. It's a partnership, and you want that thing to also reflect our work. And yeah, I mean, that's always the challenge is just getting them to, it's just taking the time to build the trust. It's like, you got to trust me on this.
Welcome to Oil and Whiskey, an Ironclad original. I am Josh Henning.
I'm Phil Gerber.
I'm Jeremy Gerber.
Welcome to Oil and Whiskey, an Ironclad original, presented by Blade HQ. Blade HQ is the place to get some stabbing shit.
Yeah.
That should change their slogan for sure.
Oh, yeah. I could see it right there underneath their title.
Scratched out and then written in your red pen that you doodle with.
I find myself saying now it's the tool for every job.
It is.
Me and John were out in the shop the other day. One of the cars, we don't have like it's a work in progress car, so it's not painted, but we have a hood plunger to pop it. So John's standing over there. What do? Yanks blade out.
Tool for every job.
You can pry, you can cut, you can slice, you can dice. Phil cut the shit out of his finger 30 seconds before this podcast. So
still attached. It was more of a pinch than a slice.
Lick it. Stop bleeding. I think that we're going to work with Blade HQ to have a special section on their website. Oil and whiskey section would be kind of cool, but
some curated.
A box stabbing section. These knives are for stabbing boxes.
They're just for straight up like hand tearing boxes.
Yeah. You like stabbing a box? Here's the knives for you.
The kick shit's ass collection.
Yeah. Just go to bladehq.com/oil and whiskey and shop their selection of knives. Today's guest is Rod Emory of Emory Motorsports, which builds some of the most badass and most recognizable Porsche 356 Outlaws around. We are also going to take some more of your listener questions, and there just might be another in the glove box. Maybe Phil brought something new. Maybe he brought the same old thing. Well, Rod, I'm glad you could come on. This is something we've been looking forward to for a while. Good grief, your family history is deep in the custom car building world.
Yeah, we've never met, but we're huge fans of your work, and we've admired you from afar. We're in two wildly different industries, but yet you seem to be the guy that crosses over with the Porsche crowd. I know it's generally purists, but you have a heck of a neat take on a hot rod Porsche as we see it. So it's a pleasure. Your name came up, early on, and we are looking forward to getting you on here and hearing a little bit about your story. We all know bits and pieces about your family's hot rod background, so very relatable to the Roadster Shop and what we do. But fire away, man. Where did this all get started?
Right on. No, well, thanks for having me on, guys. I mean, the respect and love for what we're doing goes both ways. I've admired what you guys have done for a long time because it's very similar, even though the car itself is a little different. I think the approach that we take and the approach that you guys take is really similar. My story, I'm 48 years old, but clearly it's, my story's twice that old. My grandfather, Neil Emory, started Valley Custom Shop back in the in the late 40s. But his story, really kind of started when he was a teenager, growing up here in Burbank. And, you had all the big all the big movie studios, Warner Brothers and all the others that had big dirt parking lots. And he used to deliver newspapers to Toluca Lake. And then he met a couple of movie executives that said, hey, if you want to take care of my cars, I'd love to have you wash them. Well, he's 13, 14 years old, delivering newspapers. And next thing you know, he's washing cars that are in this dirt parking lot, and he's taking them down and changing tires. And, this was late 20s, early 30s. And he was, that just kind of, went from, doing a little bit of service work to then lowering stuff and kind of personalizing cars. And then fast forward a bit to the war, and he was drafted, obviously just like everybody else. He went to war and was stationed at Alameda Military Base. And there was a general one night that cracked up the front end of his car and came in. I don't know if he was drinking or what, how that goes, but he he came into the barracks and said, "Is there anybody in here that knows body and fender?" And my grandfather's like, I do. So they immediately moved him over to the motor pool, and he started banging on cars and never left Alameda, which I'm stoked for. I mean, he lived a full life and never went to war. Instead, he got to learn the craft of metalwork and body and paint. And then as soon as he got out, he and his brother-in-law, Clayton Jensen, started Valley Custom Shop. So really officially it started in 46, 47. And one of their first projects, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the SoCal belly tanker. So, one of the earliest, land speed record cars. And so on the SoCal belly tanker, he did all the louvers and did all the metal work for the fairing and the headrest. And then that relationship with Alex Exidius, really kind of started compounding, because Alex is here in Burbank, and he's really the master at hot rodding stuff. And then my grandfather was, a craftsman and metal shaper. And so that car that you just showed on there was the next version. So what happened was they built the belly tanker in 46, 47, and then they wanted to go faster. And so there was a guy, Dean Batchelor, you read all the early magazines, and, Dean Batchelor was the photographer. Peterson Publishing did just about every magazine, all the how-tos, chop channel section, hot rod stuff. So Dean was my grandfather's best friend and would come to the shop and do all the how-to chop channel section articles for Carcraft magazine and, all that all through the 40s and 50s. But Dean came to my grandfather and said, "Hey, I think we can build a faster streamliner, but it needs an envelope body, rather than leaving the wheels, outside the belly tanker, let's wrap a body around it." So Alex Exidius says, "Well, let's take the chassis and the whole flathead running gear out of the belly tanker, and let's build a body for it." So my grandfather, their shop was just right outside Lockheed. So, a lot of scrap aluminum, a lot of, surplus stuff. And that thing was built, the SoCal Streamliner was built out of, really surplus war materials. And he hand built the aluminum body, and that became the first hot rod over 200 miles an hour. They went on to, get a bunch of records in 49, late 48, 49, 50. And then, so it's kind of cool because the connection between the belly tanker and then the SoCal Streamliner, it was the same chassis. The car ended up getting totaled. But that was really, one of the things that put my grandfather on the map as far as this guy can, bang metal and build stuff. And then he was also taking on a lot of, early Ford stuff, early Chevy stuff. If you look at the early NHRA logo with kind of the front, Roadster kind of outline, that was a track nose Roadster. That was a profile off of the what's called the Dick Flint Roadster. That was one of the very early, super iconic Roadsters that, was on Hot Rod Magazine and won the Oakland Roadster Show and all the cool stuff. So my grandfather built that for Dick Flint. And then, it just, from there, he was sectioning, shoe boxes. There was the Ron Dunn 50 that was really iconic kind of section car, the Ralph Gillette 40 that was channeled, section, pancaked hood, fenders raised, wheel arches done, just all kinds of really cool, kind of groundbreaking stuff. So if you look at the stuff my grandfather built, it was, as people call it today, kind of like OEM plus. It looked like something that came out of the factory, but it was just stylized better, smoother. You couldn't see the custom work. A lot like what you guys do. So much of it's subtle, I'm sure you guys get customers just like me that come in, they're like, "Oh man, build, I love your idea, but I want something to just pop." And you're like, "Man, you're going to spend, $400,000, $500,000 to build this beautiful thing that everything just goes seamless. And then you're going to put, a set of $200 red seat belts, and that's all people are going to see, And so my grandfather was just, his school of thought was customize everything, but make everything look like it wasn't customized. And he just kind of drilled that in me, So if you look at like all of his cars, it was really that way. And that's why like Dean Batchelor would, come and do these how-to chop channel sections, because it was just, it was craftsmanship, but it was just dialing it in so good. And then, that Valley Custom Shop kind of went through the 50s, early 60s. And then, the industry changed so much through that time. It was, a lot of lowrider stuff came in, a lot of crazy paint. And my grandfather wasn't really into crazy paint. He was more like, full, 15 coats of lacquer and just make it shine, And so he kind of got burned out. He didn't want to do insurance work. And he had an offer from a guy that had just bought the Porsche VW dealership in Newport Beach, a guy named Chick Iverson. And Chick had bought the Porsche dealership and talked my grandfather into moving his family to Newport Beach. And, the dealership, Porsches, are a unibody, complete unibody, as you know, like, it's all one piece. You can take your finger from the nose to the tail and never go over a seam. So, if they get in an impact in the front, it affects the door gaps, and sometimes it affects the windshield. And so when these cars were in the 60s coming to the United States, they needed a craftsman to put them back together. So Chick said, I'll do whatever, move your family to Newport. So my dad graduated high school, went to work for the dealership. My grandfather ran the body shop. My uncle was my grandfather's apprentice. My other uncle was my dad's, helper in the parts department. So my family was kind of centered around this Porsche dealership in Newport Beach. And then, like a few years later, I was born, and I was just in it. I grew up in southern, kind of Orange County area. Learned how to, gas weld and bang on stuff from my grandfather. And my dad taught me everything about parts for these cars. For me, it was, when I was a kid, I was like, all I wanted to do was race my three-wheeler. I was like 9-10 years old racing three-wheelers, and then racing four-wheelers. And then I was learning this stuff from my grandfather. And I was like, man, one of these days I want to build one of these old cars. And my dad found an old 53 Porsche that was super rusty. And he says, if you build it, you can race it. And I was 14. And so I built my first car, finished it when I was 16, got my race license. I went to all the kind of, the old John Russell racing schools, and did what I had to, got my license. And that was really the beginning of kind of my trajectory for this. My grandfather retired. My dad kept, on the path of selling Porsche parts. But for me, it was all about racing. That was kind of that's what drove me. And I built this little vintage race car and raced it around Southern California, and then got into the engineering program at University of Washington. And I'm like, I'm out. I'm leaving Southern California. My goal was, I loved my family, what they were doing, but I saw them struggle in the business. As you guys know, so many people come in, in this business, they doesn't matter how much of a craftsman you are, doesn't matter how good your product is. If you can't run the business side, you're not gonna have the success. And my grandfather was a super good craftsman. My dad was, super creative, but they always were just right on the fine line and barely making ends meet, and there were peaks, there were times when they were doing good, but I just didn't want to be stuck in that rut. I was like, man, I want to be an aerospace engineer. I want to go, do something where I can make some money and get an education. So went to school for a year, found out that was not the place for me. I mean, I knew more, I did a little internship with some hardware guys in the aerospace world up there. And my first year, and I'm like, man, I know more about A and hardware than these guys ever dream of. And I'm just some, kid in school, so didn't really know what I was going to do. And then I was racing at the Portland Historics and met a guy that was the sponsor of the event. So this was like 92, 93. And this guy comes up to me and he goes, Rod, I've been watching you race all weekend. You're, winning races and your car by far looks the best. I'm the sponsor of the event. I have a little potato chip company. here in Salem, Oregon. He gave me a box of chips, so kettle potato chips, Kettle Foods. And he said, I'd love to be a race car driver. I'd love to learn this stuff. Would you teach me? I'm like, I'm 18 years old, don't want to go back to school. And that was the beginning of it. That was like the first, paying customer. So built some cars for the founder of Kettle Foods. He also started Kona Brewery. To this day, I mean, I've built 6 cars for him in 30 years, including this car behind me, which is Porsche's first race car ever, the first Porsche to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans, probably the most historically significant Porsche in history because it was the beginning of all Porsche motorsport. I restored that car, finished the restoration on that in 2016.
There's a pretty wild story around that car. I remember seeing a bunch of stuff come out that was like 2018, 2019 when you brought it out.
Yeah. I took it to Pebble Beach in 2016.
That's a pretty crazy run, though, if you think about the guy that's like, hey, I sponsored this event. Here's some potato chips. Teach me how to race. Fast forward to owning the most iconic Porsche in history.
Yeah, that's why you never know how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen,
You're
where
right.
it's going to happen. That's why you should just never be an asshole, because you never know.
Right.
You never know who you're going to come across, and that first customer, what it's going to turn into.
That's crazy.
That's wild, man. I mean, what's a car? Just because I'm not like a super knowledgeable, that car sitting behind you, what's a car like that worth?
Probably about 20 million.
Oh,
maybe not the best example for gauging all of them. That's
well, yeah, I understand that. I'm just wondering what that particular car is.
Yeah.
Worth. I mean,
So the Porsche built 50 cars. So after the war, Porsche had to leave Germany and they went to Austria. And so they got this little sawmill in Gmünd, Austria, kind of over the mountains. And, they had designed the Volkswagen and that was all behind them. And they were ready to start their own car company. So they got this little sawmill and started hand banging out cars. And they built 50 road going cars. And then they had 13 bodies kind of left over that they turned into what they call the SLs or super light cars. And so this is obviously one of the SL cars. And then after that run of like 63 cars, they moved back to Germany and then started working with coach builders like Reuter, Carmen, De Ideren, all these basically bodybuilders in Germany that built the bodies for them, and then they did the assembly. But the first 63 cars were hand built by the family and their craftsmen. So it's a really significant car. It's all aluminum. I have known the car my whole life, but when we found it or purchased it, it was a roadster. So we had to rebuild it back to a coupe. The roof was cut off in 1952.
wow.
Did the people that had it know what they had then?
Yeah. I mean, he knew that it was one of the 3 cars that possibly went to Le Mans. But kind of the way it all played out is Porsche, they went to the Paris Auto Show in 1950, and they hadn't done any racing before that point. And they were at the Paris Auto Show, and the organizers of Le Mans said, we'd love to have your company enter Le Mans next year. At the time, they were a company that was probably, the size of RoadsterShop. I mean, 60, 80 employees, probably, 40, 50,000, 100,000, less than 100,000 square feet. And they were just a small car company, building quality cars. And, they just hadn't gotten to the point where they were, ready to really go racing prior to 1950. So that was kind of a big step for them. They were like, man, this is the big stage. We definitely want to make sure that if we show up that we make a good showing. So they had to make a decision on whether they were going to use their steel car, which is really what they're selling to the public now, or use one of the leftover aluminum bodies. So they took 4 of them and started doing all the things they needed to. They put hydraulic shocks on them and louvered quarter windows and big gas tanks, and did all this kind of stuff. Also, like built-in redundancies, like extra wipers. They wanted to make sure that they could go the 24 hours, rain or shine. So 2 wiper systems, an electric and a mechanical fuel system, just extra ignition system that they could easily swap over. And then they just did a bunch of testing. And they totaled one car. One of the drivers died in testing. It was just like a crazy, 4 months before they could even go to Le Mans. And then they showed up with 2 cars. Now this is like right after the war. So, France and Germany weren't really, seeing eye to eye yet. And, here's this German car company, headed to France with 2 cars. So Porsche was pretty good. They were pretty crafty. So they put 2 French drivers in one of the cars and 2 German drivers in the other. And they show up at Le Mans, and the German drivers crashed the other car in night practice and totaled it. So it never even started. So the 2 French drivers were starting the race, and they ended up winning the 1100cc class and then finishing ahead of the next class above, the 1500 car. So it finished 20th overall out of like 70 cars. And it was the first race and the first win at Le Mans for Porsche. So it was huge because, they were a small company, putting all their eggs in one basket, and they won. And it really put them on the stage from a motorsport perspective and also reliability. So it was a great marketing thing for them. The cars then, now they've got these cars that they just spent all this money on, and they took the cars, did some like land speed runs with them and some rallies. And then they said, we got to turn these things into cash. We've got cars to build and cars to pay. So they sold all 3 of them. They came here to the United States. And this one actually came right here to the Valley. So it was probably about 10 miles from where I'm at right now. And an old racer and guy that owned a dealership, John von Neumann, bought the car, raced it 3 times, and then he whacked the roof off and turned it into a roadster. Thought that it'd be faster as a roadster, which killed the aerodynamics, but it was the thing to do, right? And then that's kind of how the car was from 1952 until 2009 when we got it. So I know that's a long-winded question or answer, but yeah, nobody knew that it was the Le Mans car.
It's there's so much history there that I just don't know much about with Porsche. But just going all the way back to like, why the hell's the motor hanging off the back of it? What was the thought process with? There was nothing like that. Other than Volkswagen. Where does it come from? How did that school of thought?
Yeah, if you really look at it, they just wanted a simple package, right? And they designed the swing axle, transmission, which was a simple, lightweight little gearbox with axles coming out of it. And they wanted it to be air cooled. And they thought, keep all the heat behind you, don't put it in front of you, and build a balanced car. The cars are, when Porsche designed the Volkswagen, it was really about simplicity and building them quickly, servicing them quickly. You see all these people, these competitions with VW guys, how quickly can you swap an engine? And, it's 4 10 millimeter bolt or, nuts and a few wires and a fuel line, and you can literally get an engine out of a bug in 5 minutes, And so it's just a really simple little package. And the 356 is just an evolution of that. Half the parts on the early 356s even have the front control arms, because the suspension is exactly the same. They have the VW stamping on them. This car, when it was built, the whole front end assembly, transaxle, all that was just modified Volkswagen parts when they did it. So it was just an evolution. But
that's cool. So what drew you to the 356? I understand you had one that was probably because it was your first car, but it seems like everybody out there wants to modify 911s. Not a lot of guys doing what you're doing, at least from what I understand. So how did you end up with that platform?
Yeah, I love 356s and 911s, but the 356 was my first race car. So, of course I fell in love with it. And I realized early on, like how good you can make them handle and how well they perform. Like when we were racing them, they were 1,500 pounds with 175 horsepower. So, you think about the power to weight ratios pretty great for a little car that really grips and handles well. But I saw there was a lot more potential in the car, and I love the shape, and I love that you can, like, for me, I just saw early on, like, all the possibilities of how I could subtly just reshape the car and change things up a little bit. And I was pretty good at doing rust repair, which you have to be and sheet metal work, because, these cars are prone to so much rust. And I think, to answer your question, why there aren't very many people that do the 356s, it's mostly because when you find a donor car, they're, rusty, crusty, and wasted. And it's pretty overwhelming. But obviously I've been doing it, with my team for 32 years. So it's,
Sure.
we've got that part nailed.
So did the metal shaping, was that like, did that come as a necessity? Because, like, oh man, I love these 356s are badass cars. This is what I want to build. But damn, they're all like rusted out, and like I can't, go call Jegs and get like a lower patch panel, or I've got to make this. So was like the metal shaping a passion of yours, or was it forced that I've just got to do this? I've got to get good at this because.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of evolved, I had a love for it because my grandfather, obviously, he was the master, and he was doing it, back in the 40s and 50s. He had a couple of plenishing hammers and, a converted old riveter that was turned into like a 20 or a 36-inch CP plenishing hammer. But most of his metal shaping was done on a wood stump, and, part of, like railroad tracks that he would cut, a lot of like makeshift stuff, because it's not like, there was, Yoders hanging around that, and he couldn't afford that stuff anyways. And so I learned early on that, you can kind of do whatever you need to with a sandbag and, some hammers and dollies. And he gave me all that stuff when he retired. So I had a 5-gallon bucket and this other cool bag full of all of his hammers and dollies. So when I was first building these vintage race cars, it kind of started by building like tonneau covers and headrests, and, building a little shrouded mirror, and then doing like a front battery box and just doing small rust repair stuff, kind of out of necessity. And then from there, it's like, wow, I can raise the wheel arches a little bit and nobody's going to know. And I can, run fatter tires and still get the turning radius that I want and bump my front track out, so it was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And then like on the fabrication side, these cars are torsion bar front and rear. And so when we were racing them, we still had to run like the long torsion bar in the front. You still had to run torsion bars in the rear, but I couldn't corner balance the cars because, you're working with splines. So,
yeah. You change one and it just sends it to the other side, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, and like, so on the front, you've got one long, multi-spring torsion bar that's in the front that's fixed in the middle. And all you can do is adjust it up and down and adjust ride height. That's it. And so I started looking at all those parts and I'm like, well, if I put 2 adjusters and space them 2 inches apart, I can increase the spring rate, but I can also twist them individually, and now I can corner weight the front, right? And nobody will even know that's done. And it wasn't in the rules that I couldn't put an extra fixing point on the torsion bar. And then in the rear, I was like, well, what if I go to the off-road stuff and put finger adjusters so I adjust the torsion bars in the rear from the center with little Allen bolts instead of doing all this? And that wasn't in the rules that I couldn't do that. So that's when I really started to find the potential of these cars, that if you really make them hook up, because they're unibody, a lot of times that, you get a car and they're twisted just a little bit and nobody knows it. Sure. So I'd put them on scales, and I was like, 80% of my weight was diagonal. And I'm like, shit, no wonder this thing, dives left, when I get on the brakes, or, nose dives and, and right-hand turns. And then as soon as I kind of started tweaking on the corner balancing with kind of the factory parts, I was like, man, I can dial these things in and really make them hook up. And so all of that was translated into all the vintage race cars that I was building, because the business was really, my love was racing. So from 92 until about 2008, the majority of my business was vintage racing. So I had 3 semis, and we were doing full arrive and drive for about 30 clients, taking them racing all over the country. And I would have, anywhere from 15 to 20 of my cars at a particular vintage race event. And our cars were just, faster, better prepared than 90% of the stuff out there. So, so that's where kind of the engineering, development side of chassis and suspension stuff on the 356s came in. And then the love of the sheet metal stuff. And that just kind of evolved to where we're at today, where, we build our own engines that are crazy. We've got, just like you guys, I look at every part and say, how can we make it better but make it look like it's supposed to be there?
I do that with almost like everything except the engine. That I look at and I'm like, I got buddies that are really good at this shit. I'm going to reach out to them because we got 8 cylinders and there's all sorts of moving parts, but that's kind of the spot where we just draw the line. But very impressive what you're doing. I mean, I've been through your Instagram, through your website. It's just so cool, man. I dig the cars, and I see you've got different models of them. So when you get into like your Outlaw car, I mean, that anything that has turbos mounted in that configuration just pulls on my heartstrings. I mean, I see that and it is just like, I've got to have it. It's so badass. And then you start looking through it and it's like, man, that is so edgy. What on the chassis side of that, what is, I mean, it's not still torsion bar suspension, is it? That's got to be something totally updated.
It is. Yeah. So the majority of the cars that we build, like this one here and the regular 356s, I still keep them pretty traditional to the way Porsche did it, but I don't use like a swing axle rear suspension anymore. I got away. I went away from that years ago and went to the early 911 IRS rear suspension, but I still leave torsion bars in the cars. And then we've got, adjustable shocks and all that stuff. So 90%, 80% of the cars that we build are still pretty traditional in that way, but super dialed in. The car like the RSR that you referenced with the turbos hanging off the back, that was kind of the second car that I built in that style or with that stuff. It started a couple years before that. I had a client come to me and he's like, I want an all-wheel drive 356. So I'm like, oh, we can do that. So I like to use as many factory Porsche parts as possible. So, if I can use a control arm or a differential or a transmission from a later version of a Porsche, then that's what I'm going to use. So I went to the 90s, which is when Porsche built the Carrera 4, and said, okay, I'm just going to use all the running gear, transmission, torque tube, front diff, front suspension, everything out of a Carrera 4. And so I basically took a 964, like a early 90s 964, and cut the unibody, like the front suspension, the tunnel, rear suspension area, engine compartment. So basically just sectioned that out of the 964 and then took the 356 and did the same thing in reverse. Obviously I scanned these cars first to just kind of see how they would bind. But it's just that because Porsche's design language was an evolution, they never went like, clean sheet. So it's crazy how much everything just starts to line up. And that's what I did on this all-wheel drive one. I used all the 964 suspension, running gear, and merged it into the bottom of the 356. So then I'm like, well, if I can now have a transmission that'll take, 800 horsepower, and I've got coil-over suspension, and I've got, brakes and all this stuff to have, as much power as I want to put in it. That's when I started building the RSR, and that was same thing, graphed the 2 cars together. And then we took our 4-cylinder engine. So to kind of give you an idea, the engine that you were talking about, we took that engine and made it twin turbo, which is 400 horsepower, which is, more than enough for a 2,100 pound car. Yeah.
What's the wheelbase on those? I mean, it's like 80 inches. Where's that land?
Yeah. I mean, it varies depending on what we're doing, but yeah, between 85 and 90.
It's got to be a rocket ship.
That's ample horsepower for that.
Yeah. So yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Obviously, do you have any pushback on the the custom take on the Porsches from all the purists? It's kind of initially how when we think of early Porsche, it's all purist, all original, and you're kind of doing a little bit of a hot rod spin on it, but still in the idea of the original, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that was so. My dad was in the parts business, and he worked for the dealership, and then he started his own kind of independent parts shop called Porsche Parts Obsolete. So he was buying like all the distributor obsolescence from all the dealers in the U.S. So he had a relationship with Porsche, and he was able to buy everything from them that they no longer had room on their shelves for. So in the 70s and 80s, he's supplying parts to every purist out there that was restoring their car full Concours. And the big, really the big, part of the industry then was full Concours. There wasn't really any hot rodding in the 356 world. And so all these customers had come into my dad's shop, and this is when I was building my car in the back. He had like one bay in the very back of his part shop where I built my first car. And all of his customers had come in, and they're like, man, here I'm buying all these full Concours parts, and you and your kid are in the back, hacksawing shit up and, welding stuff together and losing the hubcaps and lowering the car. It's blasphemy. You guys can't do that to 356. This is, you're ruining the industry. People are going to start, hacking these cars up. And so a bunch of his customers then started throwing out, you guys are outlaws. And we're like, well, all right, whatever,
And so solid name to
gotta embrace it.
Yeah. So I'm like, whatever, so this was like 1988, 90, right in there when I was, building my first car. So I finished my car. We went to a couple of shows. There was no classification for, a car like mine. Everybody wanted, it was either driver quality or full Concours. So I couldn't go and do that stuff. So we were like, screw it. We'll just make a little badge that goes on the back of the cars. It says 356 Outlaws. And it was just kind of like in your face, like, you won't let us be part of your club. We'll just start our own. And so that was how that's how the word outlaw attached itself to the Porsche world. Obviously it's been in the sprint car world and, other areas, but as far as like how it attached itself to Porsche, it came from that. It was Freeman Thomas, the Ford designer, now doing Myers Manx and all that. His brother-in-law was a jeweler and made us a little badge, and that's how that term kind of stuck with us. So yeah, the purists hated the shit, but
that outlaw, that's the coolest thing, because I wish we could be that cool. Every time we need to name something, it's like 6 of us. We're sitting around and we're sending emails back and forth. We're like, I don't know, what should we call it? Like, we need to come up with something badass. Like, it's a cool truck.
Right.
And we can never arrive at anything. I mean, here he's
the
like
outlaw, and then they didn't come up with it.
Chopping this car up, and this dickhead says it's an outlaw. Fuck him, I'll put outlaw on it.
Right.
It's like, that's cool. Damn, we need a story. I'm gonna make up stories
cool.
like that.
Oh, yeah.
I thought looking at a lot of your stuff today on Instagram, just kind of refreshing myself. Really struck home with what you said earlier about your grandpa. I know your history to an extent, but I didn't know the whole Valley Custom side. And looking at everything you build, it just looks right, and like that's how it was supposed to be. Like, something was changed, but you don't know what was changed. I'm not a Porsche purist. I don't really go back into the 356 era. I like the early 70s 911s, but we have a mutual customer. I shoot texts back and forth to James all the time, like, hey, what do you think of this? Why is it this way? And like he'll send me back a 10-page text of outlining everything. But looking at your stuff and all the early 356s, I've said to him a bunch, I'm like, I don't know what he changed, but like it all just looks right. It looks like that's how it should have been. So while it's hot rodded, I think it's still very true to original.
Well, to piggyback off that, when we were talking about the Valley Rod and custom stuff earlier, the Emory family, all of them, everything you look at, the silhouette is always perfect. Of all those cars you talked about, I mean, the Channel 39, I mean, the Section 39 and the 50 and all the different stuff, the silhouette was where, and it's the same thing with what you build. It's the silhouette, the side, like they're all sexy and they're all different, but it's like they're just fast moving, sitting still. It's just the silhouette is what I'm from all the way back in the early 40s to what you're doing now. It's crazy from the Emory family that they've got that eye to look at the silhouette.
Man. Must be good genetics.
Good genetics.
Yeah, I mean, and really a lot of it is my grandfather was he wasn't a big chop guy. He didn't like chopping stuff because he's like, look, everybody knows the shape of a window. And I mean, this is a little bit of the kind of secret sauce, right? It's like everybody knows what the shape of the window looks like. And if you change the shape of the windows, it's going to change the profile and the silhouette, and people are going to immediately know that it's custom. So like most of the cars that you see that I'm building where they look like they're, you know, yeah, kind of like they're moving and they're standing still. It's like that old perspective drawing in elementary school where you drew a train, and you put 3 points and you made it, you learned how to kind of draw in motion. I look at these cars that way and say, okay, how can I change the profile? And I typically always leave the window size the same and just change it with sectioning the cars or pitching the entire roof back and carrying kind of the window shapes, because yeah, you want it to look super custom, but not let them draw their eye to the part that you modified.
That's interesting. I've always thought about that with like the Jag, the XKEs, because I love those cars. And interestingly enough, like the other guy that comes to mind when your name comes up, I always think of Rob Ida.
Yeah.
Because he's got such a cool background of a family in the hot rod world and the automotive world. He's got an XKE that
Oh,
he's
that thing's
just cutting
the
hell out
amazing.
of it.
Yeah.
And it's super rad. But
But-
it's still you're like,
You can tell that it's chopped up.
yeah.
You can tell that it's chopped up. Not
But
in a bad way.
his work is real smooth. He's looking at kind of, the line from the front to the back. And I think that's where, I mean, some people miss it a little bit. They spend all this time doing this amazing metal work, doing all that, and then they design a wheel that's completely from a different period, or they change one line that throws all the lines off. And
I think that's a lesson for the entire industry, no matter what you are. Specifically in our side, is
we're the ones the most guilty. Our industry is the most guilty of making
shit.
these mistakes.
We get and it's our own fault. We get so excited or over analyzing the details and wanting to make sure that the details are right. And those are important. I get it that the details are important. But when you focus on the details for so long and you move from detail to detail and you never take the time to step back and look at the silhouette or look at the side profile and see how that car is doing, forget all the details. Like you're right. Our industry as a whole,
I think what we end up with a lot of times, like where a shop gets a customer who comes in and he gives them the go ahead to chop it.
Oh, chop would be cool.
And it's like, we need to chop it enough so that people know we chopped it. Rather than doing the car justice, like you are. And sometimes it takes restraint. Like we've got some cars where a customer is gung ho, like chop it, cut it. I want to cut that. No. Yeah. And it just doesn't. That's not the right move for this car.
The silhouette is still the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And restraint is very important. You got it. You nail it. You got it going on. So it's look for sure.
You got to learn how to tell the customers no. That's the biggest thing. You guys know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard, because you want it to be everything that they, want and dream of. But at the end of the day, it's a partnership, and you want that thing to also reflect our work. And yeah, I mean, that's always the challenge is just getting them to, it's just taking the time to build the trust. It's like, you got to trust me on this, because most of them can't visualize. And, now, I mean, renderings and you can do so much digitally that we couldn't do 10 years ago to convey the design and message to people. But there's still some of that stuff that they have to you have to kind of lead them blind, and they have to just have faith in us. Right.
Well, what I think is funny about this, and I'm sure you've had to deal with it, is you get that customer and I've seen this car, and this car that you've built. I've loved everything that you guys have done. I mean, good.
I know where you're going with this.
The style you've got is amazing. Like, I want you to do that. I want RoadsterShop to build me a car. I want Rod Emory. I've seen this car, and this car. I want you to build me a car. These are the ideas that I've got. And you look at those ideas and you're like,
That's not me.
that we've never done anything even remotely close to that. Like, why do you want,
Right.
you don't want me
It's
to build
like,
your car?
I love the way you do that. I mean, you've got it nailed this, but I want a small block Chevy in the back of this 356. I
Yeah.
want to chop it 7 inches.
And I'm thinking
And 20s.
4 colors of flames, you know? And I'm sure you've had to deal with the same thing. You're like, you came to me because of my look, and you want something that's not even close to my look, you know?
Yeah, no, that and you nailed it right there. I mean, that's really it. They come to they come to Roadster Shop. They come to me because they love everything about us. They have to trust us, and it's just getting them to understand it. And I always tell them, look, if you've got it completely figured out, there are plenty of shops out there that do piecework and custom work. Just you can put it on a trailer and you can take it to all them to do all these little things, and in the end, you'll have what you want, I guess.
Yeah.
I relate it to tattoo work all the time. I know a couple of my good buddies are tattoo artists, and you look at some guys, we follow guys, you see somebody that's the perfect neo-traditional, like, just badass tattoo. And you're like, it would be like going to him with your sketch
Sweet tribal.
and being like,
Exactly.
tattoo that on me. And he's like, that the guy doesn't want to trace something. He wants to do art. I mean, artists are artists. They don't want to trace, they don't want to like copy your idea. Because if you were so fucking good at it, you'd probably be doing it,
Unless you just physically can't reach it. Like, what's the most off the wall? I'm sure you get all kinds of inquiries. What's the most off the wall one you've had? If it pops right to mind, what have you had to just reject?
Yeah, I mean, all day long going EV on my stuff. I won't. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys get the same thing, and I get a lot of requests. People wanting to put Subaru engines. Subaru engines are great. They have their place. But all I do is just take them for a ride in both the EV question guys and the Subaru guys, and I say no, just let's go for a ride. And as soon as I let them feel what we've developed, they're done. The question goes away. But that's really, I think that's really all it is. Everybody just wants to talk electric, and I'm sorry, but
I'm happy we got the thumbnail clickbait for Rod Emory's anti-EV.
Yeah.
Rod Emory says, fuck the EVs.
Yeah, the Porsche stuff, unfortunately, it's one of those cars that's so easy to do it to that you see it happen.
But you can't do it. You can't do it to one of these Outlaws. I mean, the analog, the feel, the smell, all of that.
Yeah, imagine that thing going down the road, like that thing looking as badass as that Outlaw RSR going.
Right.
The sound, it's got to tickle.
It's
all
part
your
of it.
senses.
It's all of that. It's the little bit of vibration. It is the it's the sound. It's all of it.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, that is something I think about all the time. Like I still only use German square weave carpet because I want that kind of wool smell that you get from it. And that wool smell and a little hint of gas. I mean, because that's what drives them right back to 1950 or 1960 when their dad or their grandpa took them for a ride in a 356. Because 80% of my customers, they want one of these 356s because they have something that triggers them back to either being in a Volkswagen or being in a Porsche, but they want something that they can, rely on, that has bright lights and drives and stops. You don't have to pump the brakes 15 times at every stop sign, So I do. I mean, I won't do electric windows in the cars because I still want that analog manual, that's just part of it. We rebuild all that stuff and make them actually work. But, I still retain all that.
A narrow enough car. I mean, you just go like.
Well, we deal with it all the time on our side too. They want to relive a long ago memory in a modern time. They want to relive that
doubled-in touchscreen.
Yeah, they want to relive that memory with their modern expectations,
Sure.
and that's like you said. There's things you're going to give up, and there's things that you're not. And an EV motor with no sound is not one of them for most of the vehicles. They got their place. I'm not going to go full anti. I'm anti the the major push that if that's going to be the salvation for everything that there is. I'm anti that.
Sure.
But I mean, there's vehicles out there that it fits. Absolutely not for your vehicles. It's no.
No, it doesn't. And, I mean, am I going to say I never will? Well, this is where I stand on this, is when I build these cars, it's got to have a Porsche drive or Porsche power plant. I'm not going to put a Subaru in it. I'm not going to put a 350 in it. It has to be, something that comes from Porsche. Obviously, Porsche's in the EV market these days. The stuff they build is way too big, way too complicated to ever fit in one of these cars. Most people are using the Tesla stuff just because it's, you can find plenty of wrecked ones and it plugs in. But, I couldn't imagine taking one of these and ripping that out and filling it full of a Tesla package. It would just, that there's a place for that in the replica market, I think. But, down the road when Porsche condenses the package.
So what you're saying is when Porsche pays you to do it, then absolutely
you got to keep that door open. You don't want to slam it.
Well, I mean, Porsche
just didn't lock it.
No, but obviously, they're gonna continue to push the envelope, and they're gonna streamline the package and make it smaller. And I use parts on my cars today that are from 90s or even later. I'll use Boxster brakes, or I'll use later stuff. And down the road, if the package is condensed and it's simplified enough, and I can package it, then I'd consider it. But at this point, there's no way.
I can appreciate the brand loyalty and keeping it all Porsche. And Phil's the same way with his Miata. I try to get him to LS swap it all the time, and I mean, he's just like,
he's power to weight. He's always talking
Mazda or no car. I mean, it's. But hey,
still got those from last week. Yeah. You guys.
Porsche's come so far though with like their PDK transmissions are so badass. And I see, like, at night, I'm sitting around, I start digging, and I'm looking for stuff, and I see there's guys that offer, you can get a standalone trans controller that will make one of those function. Does that ever spark the idea, the thought process of, okay, like, I can maybe take this to the next level? Porsche's doing stuff that's so good right now. Will you ever integrate that technology?
How modern will you take them?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, we've already played around with it, and the packaging is a little tricky just because the PDK is a big transmission and it's super heavy. But I mean, as you know, it kicks ass. I mean, it's strong, it's lightning fast. We've got a couple projects on the books that we're working on that take that kind of PDK 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder, like GT4 running gear and package it into one. It's a lot of heat management and packaging issues and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I love the PDK. It's, a lot of Porsche guys are like, oh man, manuals for life. Most of those guys haven't driven a PDK car. I actually got, I have a 2016 GT3 RS. I actually got it from James, our mutual buddy. He had it for about 400 miles, and then I got it from him. And he was kind of in that camp, I think, a little bit, like, I'm not really sold on PDKs. Man, that car is so good. Like the GT3 RSs and those cars with that transmission, it's just a different experience. And you gotta just embrace it. And when you take it and drive it in anger up in the hills or out on the track, and you really let that transmission loose, man, it's unbelievable how good it is. And it's just as fun. I mean, I've got a 996 turbo with a manual, and I've got that, and I have just as much fun in both of them, just out there just banging.
Was there any gas in it when James gave it to you? I just got to bust his balls here.
Nah, probably not. It was dusty.
We flew out to California to do some stuff on his Camaro, and he threw us the keys to the 356 Pre-A, maybe, that you got him?
The 55. Oh yeah, that thing's is it's like a little tractor.
Yeah. It's an awesome car, like sitting in it, like the feel and the smell. It's just, he was telling me it's like 85 horsepower or something, like super low, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah. Go ahead.
He threw us the keys, like, take this thing for a ride. It's like, all right, yeah, this thing's badass. Like, you sit in, it's just like so cool. It's all patinaed, like old race number on it, and we made it 400 yards from his shop. Ran out of gas going up a hill, popped it neutral backwards, and we're going down the hill and just cut the wheel and kind of rolled off into the corner over there.
Yeah, that's a cool little car. That was one that that had been sitting for like 25, 30 years. And I got a call from actually one of my dad's old friends. And he's like, I'm never going to do anything with this car. And so I called James and I said, man, I found the crusty little 55 coupe of your dreams. And I said, there's 2x4s in the doors, kind of keeping them from collapsing because of the rust. And I said, but it's got, faded paint and old numbers on it from when it was doing some, track events. So he made a decision to just kind of leave it like that. And we basically put new fuel lines on it and cleaned it up a little bit and made it so he could just kind of putt around in it. But that's really like the old school, like 356 experience,
That was what I was going to ask was what's the difference between what you're building and what they were. We do that. We drive, restored 69 Camaros and Chevelles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you've physically drove what it starts as.
We rolled it down a hill with no gas. I don't know if you consider that driving.
Yeah. So I guess explain to us, non Porsche, vintage Porsche enthusiasts, like we know what the difference is between a 69 Camaro stock restored.
Sucks.
Yep. And then what we build.
Good.
Right?
Really good.
And but I assume it's the same thing, but there's obviously, I'd like to hear it in Rod's words.
They probably start better, I'm guessing.
We cranked it for like 20 minutes trying to get it to fire.
I mean, it starts off as a better car. I'm saying.
Yeah.
Than the American cars of that era.
Yeah.
Just a guess.
Yeah, if you look at the 356, originally it was 6-volt, so that's one thing. The steering box was a VW steering, like regular steering box. So when you're going down the freeway, you're constantly kind of chasing it, and
it keeps you awake.
Yep, and the tires are like the 55 that you guys drove. The original tires on it were 3 1/4-inch rims. So the tire was super narrow, like 3 inches wide.
Look good on the front of a 32 Highboy.
Exactly. And then they were drum brakes. So, drum brakes work okay, but you got to pump them a few times and they're only going to, work so well. And then the early 356 transmissions were, the earliest ones didn't have any synchros. Then they went to the synchro mesh, but they're still like, you got to just shift them really slow and, be kind of gentle. And then they had 60 to 90 horsepower. So you kind of think about all that stuff. And then what we build today, it's 12 volts. So that means bright lights. The thing will turn over and start. They're fuel injected. So, with cold start. So, all that stuff is, kind of, better. Rack and pinion. So it's, and a little, as 10% quicker steering. So just a lot of little tweaks that just, you can take your hands off the wheel at 80 miles an hour. It tracks straight. We've got 205 to 215 tires. You've got, 4-piston disc brakes and vented rotors and all that stuff. So it's just, it's kind of apples and oranges, but from the standpoint of like the drivability, our shocks are adjustable so we can really dial that in, but the feeling is still the same. Everything about the way that it looks, the placement of everything, the window cranks, the turn signal switch, the gauges. So it's, the original cars were great. They're charming, but the brakes suck. The transmission grinds. They didn't have any power. You were better off with a flashlight taped to the hood than the headlights.
It's so crazy talking.
Sports car, but not a sports car.
Yeah, it's so crazy talking to somebody that's so polar opposite, but so similar in what they're doing customer wise and all that. Because it maybe not as much anymore, but there was that time where we dealt with so many customers that had that memory.
Yep.
And the time has gone by. The memory's gotten foggy. Cars that they're driving every day have gotten way better. So their expectations go up. The memory is always going to be better than the real life experience. And you've got those guys that buy that Boss 429 or the 69 Copo or, the Vet or the Chevelle, the, SS 396 completely restored. They buy it at auction. They buy it at this, hoping to relive that memory that they've built up way bigger in their head than what was actual, right? And then they drive it, and they usually drive it the first time with their wife or with their girlfriend. They're wanting to show off, or with their buddy, and instantly it goes back in the garage. And they don't want to admit it, but they know that like this is not what I bargained for. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I want.
Car.
And then that's when we get them. They're like, hey, look, I want it to look like it does now, but I've got to be able to stop this thing, you know? And a lot of them came in with not even like super knowledgeable about what it would be to build a car. They were just like, I need this thing to handle better. I need it to stop like when it needs to stop. I need it to crank. I need it to not smell like gas. I've got to, like, my wife is pissed. I've spent way too much money and we can't enjoy this thing. And he's talking about the same thing, you know, with it.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy though.
I had probably the biggest like rude awakening about what you're talking about. Much like you, I built a 69 Camaro when I was 15 years old, and I continued to modify it. You know, I finished it when I was 16, and then I decided I'm going to be a drag racer, and I put a big block in it, and then I put nitrous on it, and then I put a roll cage in it. And then when I got into doing this professionally, we were working with a company that was supplying suspension, and he gave me a coilover front conversion kit
Yeah.
and a
kit.
rear four link, and I put that in. And then I started doing it like much better. So the car sat at mom and dad's house. I didn't have room for it, so I park it in the garage, right? So it really hasn't been used properly in like 15 years. I've driven it here and there. Took it out recently. Mom says, get it the fuck out of the garage, right? So I go over there and I get it out of the garage. And I'm cruising around. I'm like, that fire's right. You know, big block. Nothing sounds better, right? Big block Chevy.
It's one of the best sounding
Car
cars ever
sounds
built.
so fucking badass. Black with white SS stripes. Sits good. Looks cool. And I'm driving around with my son, who he's 11 years old, and we're cruising down the street. Sounds fucking cool. It's not fast anymore. You know, I used to think it was the fastest thing in the world. And I'm stopping at stoplights. My fucking eyes are burning. I reek of gas going down roads that I drive in cars we build all the time. I don't even think about it. And this thing, I'm going down the road like this.
How many times you bottom out the collectors?
Yeah, and my son's looking at me. He's like, Dad, when are we going to put a chassis under this thing? It rides like shit. I'm like, yeah, fucking car rides terrible, you know? So even like as bad as they were, that next step, like
It was still, that was way better.
Yeah, but it's still just
Fast forward 10, 12 years.
right. It's just as bad. It's just never what you remember it, you know? As cool as you thought you were, like the stinking of, maybe I've gotten soft or turned into a pussy or something. But I'm like, I'm sitting at the light. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is terrible. My eyes are burning. Like, I'm going to stink, you know? Like, so fuel injection, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But it's crazy. It is crazy. I'm sure you deal with this. You deal with those guys. And then, you know, when you build a car, this is everything that I hoped it would be and more. Holy crap, I can't believe this thing drives like this. And like you said, you haven't changed the placement of the things. Those memories didn't change. You know, the way the gauges looked, the steering wheel to arm to door panel, where they used to sit their arm, or how they'd hang it out the window, or where this was at. You know, all those things are staying the same, but now they can drive it like they want to drive it. But then as time goes by, then you've got the guys like, well, okay, I want to do the next car and I want to do the next car. And then it's, you know, the guy that's got the brand new, you know, GT3 RS or, you know, whatever the latest, greatest hypercar is. And he's like, I want it to drive like that, you know, or let's do all of these. Well, then you start getting into the unrealistic expectations of the creature comforts, you know, things in a 69 Camaro or something like that. I'm sure you deal with the same thing. You're like, can I have a heads up display? Well, no, you can't.
Yeah,
you know,
a couple $1 billion of engineering behind that.
Yeah.
Porsche for a long time did a good job of that. Like they stayed pretty like utilitarian. Up until recently, they're getting a little, I mean, I don't want to say fluffy. Yeah, maybe a little fluffy. They've got all the bells and whistles now, but it hasn't been long. You know, they stayed pretty true to form for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, the shift kind of happened when they went from air cooled to water cooled. And then once they went to water cooled, it was, you know, there was a lot more technology and electronics and everything else. So kind of mid 90s. And now, yeah, the cars, yeah, they're a little fluffy. You know, they've got, you know, you can get every option on all of them. But, that's what people expect, that obviously they had to go, all in, but that's why they also have their cars like the GT4s, the GT3 RSs, the 911R, kind of their cars that are stripped down. You can get air conditioning, but you're not going to get, heated seats and all that other stuff. I mean, and so, they have their line of cars that are still pure blooded, kind of, race cars or, and still pretty analog.
Yeah, that's sweet. I'd love to connect, like with you bring a Camaro, one of our Survivor cars, and come out to the West Coast.
Yeah, we should do that.
Bring James's car.
Yeah, because man, it'd be so cool to get. I mean, I'm happy to be a passenger, but to get behind the wheel of something that you've built would be super cool. But for you to feel that analog sensation of even those muscle cars, it's very much like there's
Yeah,
some similarities there on
Yeah.
here that I think would be really, really cool to even like get those cars side by side. It's such a cool thing to compare them.
yeah. There's a fine line when building them to this level of the steering. We want the steering to be great, but you also want the feedback.
Still want it heavy and
Yeah, and
Yep.
then
Want
the
some feel
brakes,
to it.
the brakes you can make them. There's lots of things you can do to make them just,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
breathe on the pedal and make it stop.
But I want to step on the.
But you want to be able to step on the pedal and then, not losing all of that heritage and that analog and that sensation for the pursuit of perfection while also pursuing for perfection. It's very difficult. I'm sure you deal with it at the same time. That's why I'm getting a little excited. Like
You are getting
I
excited.
am.
over there.
Well, it's because of the similarities are so there. And I
Yeah.
mean, starting with something that is so poor.
Yeah.
Creating
Yeah.
creating something that is so great while leaving the box the same. If that,
Yeah.
for lack of a better way of saying it.
No, for sure. I mean, and it does take restraint. Obviously we could make the cars ride smoother. We could make the brakes, firmer or work better. But you still need some of those analog kind of feedback features that still make you believe you're in an old car. Otherwise, I get people, I want it to drive just like my 2019 Boxster. And I'm like, perfect. Go to the dealer and get another color,
Right.
And that's what I tell them. I'm not going to build a car that's going to drive like your 2019 car. That's not what we're doing. I'm not taking a 356 and making it drive like a modern car. I'm taking a 356 and evolving a number of components to make it, relatable and relevant today, but still giving you that analog experience that you really want, because that's what 90% of our customers want. The 10% that want it to drive like a Boxster, I just tell them this isn't the place for you.
And those guys are all dentists, right? Like,
But let's face it. If that's what we wanted to do for all of us, we would just be making bodies and putting them on like 2020 Toyota Camry chassis.
Right.
Just rebody a Toyota Camry and be like, here you go. It's got all the things and drive it.
West Coast Customs, right?
Well, that's don't
So you
speak.
throw a fish tank in there too. You
Don't
never know.
speak bad about Ryan for Red Langley House
Or
or
Steen.
Steen. That's right down
He
there.
he actually did that. He took a Boxster, and I think it was for Justin Bieber, but he took a Boxster and wrapped 356 body panels around it.
Jesus.
I'm just gonna leave it there.
You don't have to leave it there. This
Keep going with it. Dive in. Let's unpeel this.
Well,
onion.
I mean, the proportions are not the same, right?
you're kidding me. You're telling me that didn't look this. Oh.
Hey, you said that like you were surprised at like the way those cars evolved. How much of them is still very much the same? I would have thought it's like
Yeah. Oh, and West Coast Customs behind it too for the fabrication. I mean, you would think that would absolutely. I'm shocked. I am absolutely shocked.
the way
It didn't come out
with
right.
these past few podcasts, the way you've been talking, you are not going to SEMA this year.
getting your ass.
I'll go to SEMA. I'll just have to have
He is walking the line, isn't he?
Somebody big,
Yeah,
big next to me. Are you going to be?
It might be it might be the whiskey, but he can blame it on the whiskey.
Whiskey muscles.
Oh,
you touched on something earlier that I think resonates really big for our industry as well. You said a lot of guys are craftsmen and not necessarily minding the business side. So you're living paycheck to paycheck or right on the edge, some peaks and valleys. What have you done differently to focus on the business side of the business to to bring your company where it's at?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's not getting sidetracked and trying to do too many things. And then obviously I got to learn a number of things from my grandfather and my dad. And when I got really serious about this business, my wife and I had just gotten married, and she's pretty darn smart, a lot smarter than I am. And when we started, it was just the two of us, and she's always run the back end of the business for me. And today things have evolved. Now my daughter also works here, and my son, so all four of us are under these walls. But yeah, my wife's always run the business side so that I can focus on client interaction and building cars. And we don't sell any of the parts that we build for the cars. It's just one of the things that I've kind of always held kind of tight. That way people couldn't kind of replicate what we're doing. And also, I just don't want to have to spend the time, coaching somebody on how to take one of my, because I take a 6-cylinder 911 engine and turn it into a 4-cylinder. So, it's like there's so much about what we do that I would have to coach people on what type of oil system and what they need to, reinforce here. And so I early on, I said, I'm not going to sell parts. I'm just going to put them in my cars. And even down to our t-shirts and stuff, I gave that little side business to my mom, and I said, you can sell all the t-shirts you want. It just got to be black, and she does that side of it. But so I've just kind of stayed pretty laser focused on, building these cars and building a really great team. And my wife and I we run a super lean shop. Like, when I say lean, I mean, there's 20 of us here in total, but it's like everybody is producing, and we're debt free, and we just keep it, close to home. And, that way, if times get tough, like when the pandemic hit and everybody had to, at least in my neighborhood, we had to send employees home for 2 months, or they'd shut our power off. So it was just, all those little things that if we had crazy debt, it'd be hard to do that type of thing, So that's really it for me. It's just, it's the right team. My wife, my daughter in the business side, my son and I, and our crew just producing out in the workshop and being lean and focused on kind of, one thing that we know how to do really well.
I know you love the weather and you're born and raised there. I mean, since the 40s, so you got family history there. Have you ever thought about how much more profitable you'd be outside of California?
Yeah, let's not even go there. Yeah, but what keeps me, it's kind of one of those things where it kind of keeps me humble. I got to hustle every day, So, it's operating in California. Yeah, it's loaded with challenges, but at the end of the day, this is kind of the focal point of the Porsche environment. It always has been. When Porsche produced the 356, 50% of the cars when they were built came to the US, and 25% of them came right here to Southern California. So 25% of all production of the 76,000 cars was right here. And so it's always been, the focal point for Porsche. And, there's just, no other place that I can be. Glamis, and on Sunday I can head to the beach, I mean, you can be at the snow, the sand dunes, the beach, the desert within an hour of each other.
You should have stopped at the whole history of the Porsche thing, because I was going to give you that you're the first person that's given a legitimate answer and not been like, oh, the weather's great. Yeah, love the 70 degrees. Yeah, you know what? You could travel for weather. But you gave an actual legitimate reason of being there.
The dunes are pretty cool.
Yeah, the dunes are pretty bad. It was a good tie-in. I was looking on your Instagram.
How much of your perseverance and determination and being able to overcome obstacles do you attribute to still being alive after riding a whole bunch of three-wheelers growing up?
Yeah, I
You're
mean,
a three-wheeler guy, huh?
oh man, yeah. I started racing three wheelers when I was 10 years old, and then it evolved to kind of the four wheelers and raced all over the country on those. And yeah, man, I still, if you look right here, I got my little, early three wheelers, and I've got stacks of them. I broke every bone in my arms, and but when I was 8 years old, I was rebuilding a little ATC 90 engine. So, a lot of what I do, I can relate all the way back to having a little workshop and wrenching on three wheelers. So, but yeah, for me, it's just, I'm in here every day grinding hard. I mean, I didn't even wash my hands for the interview, here.
Nice. Dude, I'll have to share some pictures with you. I built this super rad ATC 70 with a big bore kit, and it's all metal
Oh,
flake with like pro tapers, and thing hasn't bit me yet, but get me one of these days. But me and Phil grew up on three wheelers too. We never graduated to we were just after that era of like getting into the ATC 250 or like the big two strokes that would legitimately take your life quickly.
Yeah.
So we grew, we were young kids, so they were 50s and 70s. And,
Still run over your leg and get that nice inside calf burn where
Oh,
you
the
would
tire
kick
just takes it
you would
right
kick
off.
the shit out of your Achilles, like the backs
Yeah.
of your. Because that's a natural reaction. Like
Yeah.
as it starts going over, you throw a leg out, and that back
And you
tire
just run it over.
bites you. And
oh, many times.
Yeah, you posted a picture of you had ATC 250 recently.
Yeah. Well, actually, so yesterday, or 2 days ago, I just bought another ATC 250R, an 82, which was kind of the very first 250R. But I bought one that's street legal and licensed in the state of California. So
How is that possible? In
Great
California?
idea.
So get this shit. So David that does the paint on my cars, he calls me up and he's like, "Hey Rod," he goes, "A buddy of my dad's is cleaning out this barn in Palm Springs, and there's three wheelers in it. I told him you'd take them, no matter what." And I'm like, "Shit, man, my wife is going to kill me. I have I've got probably 15 four wheelers and I don't know, like 20 three wheelers, and I've got them stacked up in the shop and hiding in shipping containers. And so I'm like, dude, 3 more? He goes, "They got license plates on them." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So he sends me pictures. No shit. 2 of them are 185S's, both plated, rear lights, squeaky horn that got them, through the, and brake light switch on the pedals, full plate, and the 250R. So I went and picked one of them up yesterday morning, and no shit, what it was, some retired fireman back in the 80s somehow got all 3 of these things plated. He's kept the registration alive the whole time. So
that's got to be the dumbest. That's got to be the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard.
But do you realize what that must be worth? I mean, in California, you can't even own a gas-powered leaf blower.
California, with the dumb laws that they've got on everything, everything's fucking stupid. They're like, yeah, 3-wheeler, yeah. Here's a license plate.
So when you guys come to town, I'll make sure they're gassed up. I'll have more than 400 feet of gas in them, and I'll get some, I'll get some jackets from the Burbank Choppers guys or somebody, and I'll make any packs that we can Velcro on the back, and we'll cruise Burbank Boulevard on our 3-wheelers. So,
dude, I will be there tomorrow.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's awesome.
It was seriously, that's like a childhood dream. I remember in elementary school, middle school, I was like, man, if my 3-wheeler was only, street legal, I could just ride that bitch to school. Here we go.
That's probably the best part of the fucking podcast there.
Dude, that's so badass.
So now we come to some of the standard questions that we ask all the guests. Your very first car and a story about that car. We heard a little bit about the first car, but tell us a story about that car.
1953 Porsche that I restored. So kind of a cool story. Fast forwarding, I was vintage racing the thing, and my son Zane was 5 years old, and we were racing up at a race in Northern California. and they have what's called the mechanics picnic, which means you can take, so at lunchtime, they close the track down. You can take your mechanic out there and circle, go around the track. So, every time I'd always throw Zane in the, we'd be in the paddock and I'd put his car seat in, helmet on, and he's got his suit on, and we'd be out there for an hour, and he's 5-6 years old. We're banging laps. So one time I decided so the next year, my niece wanted to get in the car. So I took his car seat out on pit lane. Sure as shit, man. They came over, yelled at me. They're like, look, you can take a mechanic out, but you can't take your 5-6-year-old kid out. So it was just, for me, it's sharing the experiences with my kids, and, my kids being there the entire 20 years I was racing that car. And, that's what it's all about. Right.
That's awesome. Next up, favorite car movie and why?
Favorite, man.
Dude, we've had 40 something episodes of this. You would not believe the answers we've got. So don't feel it.
Death Race 2000.
Okay.
That's the first.
Yeah.
Let's bring in something new.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can remember when I was a kid, I don't know, this was probably mid 80s. I don't even know who was in it. I think Sylvester Stallone, it was like one of his early movies. I haven't watched it since I was a kid, but Death Race 2000 was all kinds of crazy modified cars with, spikes coming off the front. And basically these cars are racing across America, and as many people as they could run over. That's how they got points. But for me, it was more about the cars and seeing all these crazy modified cars, blasting around. So yeah, there we go. Shitty old movie called Death Race 2000.
Nice. I like that one.
It is good. You never know what you're going to get. That's what I try to preface it with. It could be loosely based on cars.
Well, I was trying to think. There was no prominent Porsche movies.
Yeah. So I was going to say there's been
Interesting.
nothing.
I mean, there's
their history.
Obviously there's Le Mans, which is, there's the movie Le Mans, which is,
Sure.
Steve McQueen and that, but that's every Porsche guy is going to say that that's his favorite movie.
Yeah, and he's an outlaw. Dude, haven't you been listening?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I rode a donkey to elementary school. There you go. You think I'm shitting you?
You really rode a donkey?
All right. You ready for a quick story?
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Bring it.
We're not going to just blow past that one.
This will kind of, tell you how, So I grew up in a little canyon called Trabuco Canyon. So it's in Orange County. It's kind of at the base of Saddleback Mountain. Dirt roads. So we all lived on dirt roads. And my parents owned the general store, kind of the grocery store at the mouth of the canyon. And our elementary school was right on the other side of the road. And there was 100 kids from kindergarten to 6th grade. So super small. But we had like an animal program where, we took care of horses and we had goats. And so everybody got release time during the day to go out and tend all the animals and all that stuff. And once a week, you could ride your horse to school. And so everybody would ride their horses to school. And it was just this coolest thing. So when I was 6 years old, so I have 3 older sisters, and they all, horses. They love horses. And I never rode their horses. It was just not my thing. I rode 3-wheelers. So my dad's like, you want to get a horse? And I said, no, I don't want a horse. And so we were on our way to this little town, Wrightwood, and there were big signs, donkeys for sale. I said, I want a donkey. My dad's like, you want a donkey? All right. So we pulled over. We had this old, 70s motorhome, and we pulled over, and sure as hell, $150. We buy little Jack, and he's a little baby donkey.
Yeah.
And we brought little Jack into the motorhome, and I held a little Folgers can with some grain in it. And we took him back to our house. It was about a 2-hour drive in the motorhome. And he was my donkey, lived with me for 29 years. But
that's quite possibly the coolest thing I've ever heard.
So here we are.
3-wheelers.
So here we are. It's time to ride that jackass to school, right? Because that's why I got this sucker. So my sisters, they all ride their horses. Anybody that tries to ride a donkey, there's a reason why all the gold miners, used a leash or reins and pack their stuff. They didn't try and ride it. So I get on little Jack, and we get about 100 feet down the road, and he just stops. Nothing. Not gonna move. So I'm like, shit. All right. So I walk him all the way to school. I said, screw it. I'm taking him. So I take him to school. We put him out with the horses, and that sucker started hee-hawing so loud that the principal came in. I think I was in third grade, and the principal comes in. He says, Rod, he goes, get your donkey and head home. So I'm like, shit, this donkey just got me out of school. So I did. I took him home, but they wouldn't let me bring him back. It was just, his thing. But yeah, so I legitimately had a donkey, and little Jack, he lived with me. I had him 29 years till he passed away.
Damn. That's all. Dude, these are the perks of California. We have nothing cool like that.
Two things.
Yeah.
If I had told the same fucking story, right? Being from Alabama, you would have
a
given
lot
me
more fitting in Alabama.
Yeah, you would have given me so
Yeah,
much
but-
shit. But he's from California, so it's like cool.
It's like
There's
a hip donkey.
Yeah,
in
there's
It's
California.
a hip donkey.
There's a
Okay.
certain level of like class I associate it with. Like I look at and it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's
I
like, you look-
appreciate
yeah.
that. Not at all. Number
It-
two, it reminds me, you've told this story, but I don't think Rod's ever heard this story about you and the horse.
Oh yeah.
You and Phil. Phil had a horse.
Phil was
And not a
horse-
donkey,
yeah,
but Phil had a
rode
horse.
some horses.
Go ahead.
You
Come on.
You seem to like it so
Oh, I
much.
love this fucking
Yeah.
story. So Phil rode horses semi-pro.
Competitively, yeah. basically
Competitively.
pro.
Yeah, semi-pro. Jeremy was young. Jeremy being the young kid that he was.
Riding
Whippersnapper.
three-wheelers and
Yeah, riding through and all that. So you're in the
We're a horse
stall,
show. It's like a competitive horse show.
right?
Yeah.
And what happens?
So I must have been like 7 or 8 years old, and I decide Phil's on the horse. He's got all the trainers there. He's like getting ready to go out to like win some grand champion award or something. And I decide like I'm gonna be funny, and I'm gonna go behind the horse, and I'm gonna put my hands over my mouth, and I'm gonna make the loudest farting noise you can possibly make. And that's a good idea to do directly behind the horse.
It's not.
Well, it's not, because the fucking horse kicked the living shit out of me. Yeah, so the horse kicks me in the chest. That's a little kid. I mean, it just ragdolled me, and I was like, I didn't know what to think. I mean, it's probably the worst
Did
pain I've ever been in my
Did anybody
life. but-
check on you? Or were they worried about Phil on the horse?
Well,
That's what I was gonna say. They just
they wanted to make sure the horse wasn't spooked, and then it was
Right.
like, it was
Oh,
there was
what
a lot of
happened?
mixed emotions at the time. But
He was in another room by
yeah,
that point.
dude, I had a fucking horseshoe, like a horseshoe print on my chest.
So do you have a tattoo now?
I should
To
get
kind of
that.
bring back the
You
memory.
should, yeah.
You
You
should.
get the hooves.
That would be a
You
good one,
should.
right?
Or
It-
two horseshoes.
But which way is lucky, up or down? Is it
Up
isn't
is
that-
lucky.
Yeah, so that would be unlucky, right? Because it would have kicked me.
No,
No,
up.
would've
It
been-
would've
yeah,
been
yeah,
up.
lucky.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a lucky kick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm getting the tattoo.
That's my favorite. We've told
Yes.
that story a couple of times, but that's my favorite one. When you brought the donkey out, I had to
Yeah.
go there.
Just like seeing him get the shit kicked out of himself.
I
Yeah.
mean, dude, you see, if I could pay any amount of money to see you get kicked by a horse
Yeah,
right now,
I know
I
you
would.
would. I know you would love that.
Yeah, I would fucking love it. Dude, honestly, as an adult, would probably be more
Dude,
funny
I
than
feel
a
like
kid.
if that happened right now, I would just I'd flex and it'd probably
Take it.
break the horse's leg.
We can make that shit happen tomorrow and find out. All right, next up. If you had a customer come in tomorrow and say, unlimited budget, I don't even care what you build. I want you to do your passion project. I don't care how much it costs, how long it takes. What would you build?
Well, it'd be a Porsche.
Of course.
Right?
Obviously, let me just tell you that you'll see it soon. But I'm building it for myself.
Oh,
Nice.
flex.
And well,
Yeah.
when I say soon,
What's the time frame?
yeah, 2 years out.
Okay.
Hey.
Yeah,
That's the best answer I can hope for.
and it's a
Right.
roadster. It's a roadster.
Really?
Yeah.
918?
No,
914.
It's
What's
gonna
the
be
red
old.
car?
It's gonna be old.
I'll just leave it at that. So
Okay.
yeah, a
Stay
roadster for
tuned.
myself.
Stay
Stay tuned.
tuned.
Are you gonna drop any teasers, or is that gonna be we gotta wait 2 years until it's like bam?
I'll drop teasers. Yeah,
Subscribe.
and you'll get it. Yeah. All right.
If you could go back in time at any point in time, what time would it be and what would you tell yourself?
if I could go back in time, it'd be like 50 to 52, like kind of in that time period, just because I'd love to see my grandfather in action and I'd love to see the little Porsche factory in action because that's kind of my worlds and they collide. And I would just tell myself to, get up earlier than everybody else and work harder than everybody else. I think that's what I told myself in the 50s when did some time traveling.
Yeah. Nice, man.
It's working.
Best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I mentioned it earlier from my grandfather. Modify everything, but just make everything look like it wasn't modified.
And last but not least, what's in your pocket? It's time to do a pocket dump.
Well, my wallet, but that's the only thing in my pocket. But there is a cool challenge coin in my wallet that has kind of my first special that I built. And then around the perimeter, it says Porsche parts obsolete, established, Valley Custom Shop established, Emory Motorsports. It's kind of like the, kind of the history of all that. And then our little, that's the badge, right? So the 356 Outlaw badge that we talked about so I put it on here. I made 100 of these and,
how many of them have you used? How many of them have you thrown down and made a challenge?
I mostly challenge my employees because, the guys that have been with me a while, they've got them. And then I did 100 of them numbered and kind of significant people in my life that have impacted me have them. But yeah, I don't do it all the time. Usually, we'll be out at Glamis at, Boardmanville, the bar, and slam it down, or at Christmas party. I had a pocket full of cash and I wanted to see which guys had it. And I kind of did a reversal on it and I slammed it down and took the cash and divided it amongst the guys that had theirs. It's just fun stuff. But yeah, that goes everywhere with me.
That's awesome.
Rad, man. Dude, so we're supposed to end right now, but I got to ask you about Boardmanville, because me and Phil, we've been out to Glamis a whole bunch of times, big into the sand sports stuff. Never made it there. Is it that's still open, alive,
It's
and
an
well?
urban legend.
Yeah, or is that?
It is an urban. No, so go back 30 years ago when we used to go all the time. All through the 80s, 90s. You could go under the railroad tracks. So it was back then. So it's basically you go to the Glamis store and then you go down Wash Road and you go down a handful of washes, and then you used to be able to go under the railroad tracks and we'd all ride our 3-wheelers and our buggies right to it. Then there were a couple of accidents with the railroad, and so the railroad filled everything in, which sucks, and took away the ability to dive under. And so, obviously there was people that drank too much and did stupid shit, and that was kind of part of it. But it's still there. You just have to go over the railroad tracks on the road and then down the kind of frontage road and get there. But it's awesome. It's actually
it's still open, alive and well.
Oh hell yeah, yeah.
We were out there. We went past the Glamis store, and then you hang a right, and you go down that frontage road. We went a ways down there, but
it's still there. It's still they got food, drinks. I mean, it's been areas of it have been all remodeled, and it's super nice. Still dollar bills stapled on all over the walls, and it's a little different because they took away the direct access, but we all still go there, and everybody's fighting to try and get that access back because that was so much of what we all kind of loved. And then at the other end of Glamis, down by Gordon's Well and Buttercup, there's Dooner's Diner, which is a kind of a restaurant kind of right out there by the dunes.
So that's when you run like way south and you cross, what's that highway? You cross the
Highway 8.
Highway 8?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it's actually on the same side as Glamis. You don't cross to go to Dooner's Diner, but yeah, that's where it's at, because Glamis is basically 10 miles wide and 40 miles long, right? So
yep.
Kind of as you enter from Brawley, and then you go dunes to Glamis store is about 10 miles, but it goes 40 miles down to the Mexico border.
Pretty much the coolest place on
Earth.
I've never been.
Yeah.
I've never been.
Best sunsets on Earth. It is. Yeah.
It's not Earth. Like it's
Really?
yeah, it's wild, and
We got to do
especially
it.
from being around here.
We got to do it.
Yeah, we grew up going to Silver Lake Sand Dunes in Michigan, and it's like a mile by 2 miles, and we thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it's 5 minutes, and you just do a loop. 5 minutes, do a loop. There's like 6 hills on a run, and then we went up to Glamis for the first time, and you're just like, holy shit, this doesn't stop.
Yeah, it's wild,
Yeah.
man.
Mind blown. Yep.
Well,
We
dude,
got to set up a trip.
yeah, we have to, man. This has been awesome. We'd love to come out and connect with you.
That'd be great.
Love to go for a ride in one of your creations, man.
You going to be at SEMA by chance?
I'm not this year. My daughter's getting married in 2 weeks. We've got just a bunch of events going on. There's, yeah, man, it's, I don't think I'll be there this year, but
we're going to be, we'll be out probably next, in January?
Yeah, for the Roadster Show.
We'll be out in January, and maybe we'll come out a little early and see if we can set up, come down, see the shop and hang out.
I'd love that. Love to have you guys over.
Awesome,
sure.
man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. It's been awesome, man. Keep up the good work. Huge fans of yours.
Well, same. Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it, guys.
Let us know if you ever need anything.
Right on. Goes both ways.
Dude.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Big thanks again to Rod Emory. Remember, you can learn more about Rod by checking out his Instagram at Rod Emory or going to EmoryMotorsports.com. What are we drinking?
Bourbon. We are drinking tonight a Ezra Brooks Distiller's Collection. Coming from Garfield's Beverage Warehouse. It's a Garfield's Beverage Warehouse store pick. Interesting bourbon, 107 proof. Not necessarily like a top shelf deal. Don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's like a $50, something like that. 45, $50, something along those lines. I pulled it off the shelf, looking at it, thinking it's 107, thinking it would be an easy drinker. It's 107. It's not, it's no 113, right?
Right.
But it drinks like 120.
I was coughing and fighting through it for probably the first half hour of the podcast.
Yeah,
it lit me up.
First drink is that's like a roundhouse kick to the chest.
Or like a horse kick to the chest.
Yeah, like
tie into earlier conversation.
I think that was a pony kick, actually. If I remember correct. It's a pony.
He wasn't riding a pony.
At the time he was.
Was he?
Yeah, it was a pony.
It doesn't sound as near as badass. You should have said it was a horse.
It was a Clydesdale.
I'm pretty sure it was a Clydesdale.
Exactly.
Right. It's one of those Budweiser.
It was a Clydesdale, and it jumped up and with both hooves.
Right. And you withstood it.
Double kicked me in the
It
chest.
was a roundhouse from
Yeah, and I shrugged it off. At any rate, yeah, it is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, and I don't know. It's a tough one to review because the flavor's pretty good.
Burn.
Yeah.
See, I was the exact opposite. The burn didn't get me as bad. The flavor is just a little. I don't know. Maybe it's it's a little smoky or something that's just a little not in my flavor
Coming off
palette.
the last two high proof bourbons, this was a pretty solid kick in the chest. I think. What was the one we had last week? That we were
things right there.
Last week it was the
Colonel Taylor.
No, we went with
Bardstown.
Bardstown.
That was like a 112 or something, and that
should be on the.
Somebody with some knowledge on this should chime in.
110 proof Bardstown, and that was pretty smooth. And then the Old Elk Infinity was pretty hot.
The Old Elk Infinity
was smooth.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty hot.
I liked it, but yeah, it was hot, but I liked it. This is not. I don't get the burn part of it. It's just the flavor is just a little twangy to me.
It does say it's handpicked from extraordinary barrels, though.
It's got that going for it.
I don't know. Not my favorite. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Can I write notes for the reviews?
No, you can. Yeah, you can write notes, dude. Just like the doodling shit's got to stop. Like,
so no doodling.
Light. I think you could do like light to moderate doodles.
Light to moderate. Okay. Yeah. What is your review?
I'm gonna go 6-0 on that. Not a huge fan of it. if somebody's pouring it, I would drink it. It's a lot better than a lot of things. If you see it, well, I'm not here. Well, here's the way I'm going to put it. If you walk into that bar that's not loaded up with bourbons and there's like Bulleit, Woodford, you're kind of like,
It's the best of the rest.
that's a step up. It's like, oh, Ezra Brooks, that's pretty good. I'll take that neat. Or what, throw it on the rocks. It's probably better on the rocks.
Yeah, it probably is.
But
Yeah, rocks.
I
would
think
probably-
I'd be hard pressed if you mix that in with any other bourbons that we've had that we've rated higher than that.
I wanted to go.
I'd be hard pressed to.
I wanted to go
people have it.
5.9 just to go a little lower than you. But 6.0 is where it's at. 6.0 is the same.
Yeah.
You're
Put
saying
me down for one of those as well.
All right, 6-0 across the board.
Yep. That was a good, solid review. All right, it's time for listener questions. This is where we take some of your listener questions that you've sent in via DM, via email, via snail mail, via voicemail.
Has anybody snail mailed one in?
Somebody's mailed something in
One. Yeah, we've had one.
from prison.
Yeah.
Out of prison.
It was just a couple of locks of hair. So I don't know what it was. There was no question. It was just have this. Yeah. So, but before we take some of your questions, we want to give a shout out to this segment sponsor, which is Stillhouse Spirits. You can find Stillhouse whiskey at a store near you by going to stillhouse.com and using the store locator. Let's face it, pretty much everybody's got Stillhouse. If they don't,
Get it.
find someplace else that does. The Stillhouse whiskey is something I've been hitting a little hard lately on the black bourbon at the house.
You getting after it?
It's an easy
It's a good
drinker.
Yep.
It's an easy drinker. Yeah, I think we've got the workings of an idea of something new for Stillhouse for coming up episodes.
That's right. Yeah, we were
Little teaser.
we were noodling
Yeah.
the other night.
We got
That's
some.
pretty cool.
So stay tuned. Something cool coming for that. But if you want your question read on the show for listener questions, send them our way on Instagram at RoadsterShop or at Oil and Whiskey Podcast or at email or at snail mail or at voicemail. However you would like to get your question read. Let's face it, if you're snail mailing it, you're probably a weirdo. But it could be a good question. Right?
They're in jail. Like it's 100%. Like,
Okay.
the only things we get that come in the mail, like
Or from jail.
Yeah.
They got good questions too.
good pen. You'd be surprised at the penmanship.
You ain't got nothing else
That's
to do.
quite nice.
Get good at the handwriting. All right. First question. Why isn't anyone claiming 2011's Drive as the best car movie? What are your thoughts? I know this one's you go to this one all the time.
I do.
I don't know what movie this is.
This
You
is
never
with
seen Drive?
yeah, this is with his man crush.
Fuck out of here. What's the
He's
guy's
a good looking dude.
What's his name?
Ryan.
Ryan
Gosling.
Gosling. Yeah. So I always joke, which interestingly enough, this T-shirt that I'm wearing tonight. So I joke that Ryan
This is gonna be an
Gosling.
interesting
Okay.
connection.
No, this is gonna come full circle.
Okay.
My buddy Zach.
Yep.
I always joke,
Yeah.
him and Ryan Gosling is like it's like a 10% better looking version of Zach. What'd you say? Kind of got the same thing going on. You know Zach.
He's a better looking version of Zach. Yes. Okay.
But there's a there's a
Okay,
connection there,
I get it.
right? Well,
Yeah, yeah.
Zach gave me this T-shirt, right?
Okay.
That's
get- I get the tie-in.
Anyway,
Right. But the Drive, it does
Anyway,
have one of the best scenes.
it's pretty damn cool. I mean,
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling's not the guy that you generally think of as like cool, right? He's not like John Milner,
No.
Fonzie,
No.
Steve McQueen,
Right.
But he's fucking pretty badass in that movie. The jacket, was it like a scorpion or something on that?
Oh,
Like a
I
satin-
remember that one now.
It's like
yeah.
a satin jacket, and he just plays it cool the whole time. I think he's got like a toothpick.
He's an
Well,
actor. So he's
Yeah,
acting.
yeah, I
He's
know.
acting
But
cool.
he acts well
Right.
in that movie. That movie's it's a cool ass movie.
It's got
So,
some cool shit to it. Yeah.
I'll say that. Yeah, it's interesting. Nobody else has referenced it. I like it. I like. the
I
movie.
think everybody else is so scared to mention a Ryan Gosling movie on this podcast for fear of retribution.
I don't know, man. I don't know. He
Dude,
doesn't.
you come on here. You gotta be a little hardcore.
Yeah.
You gotta be a little badass.
He definitely plays the role of a badass in that movie.
Well, yeah,
You
that's
can't. Yeah,
acting. You can act. You can be
Yeah.
anything in a
but he
movie.
does it well. He does it well, and it's a good movie.
All right, next
It
question.
is.
Yeah.
It is good. It does have a great scene, a great driving scene in that movie. Great soundtrack. Got a cool.
So it's a good
Cool.
fucking movie, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not busting your
He's
balls.
not going to come out and like give
No,
you
he's
credit
not,
for it.
right.
It's just gonna.
Yeah.
This isn't a competition
Yeah.
on who thinks it is good and who doesn't. Next up, can we get more Waffle House tips from Josh?
This is an
Yeah,
area
please.
you excel head and shoulders above probably anybody else in the world.
Well, I feel like I've given like all the tips, but
you just gave what you gave the tip.
I did.
Dude, I don't. You have the tribal knowledge, and you bring some really awesome tips. But me and Phil are pretty experienced Waffle House goers.
You are.
We were trapped in Oklahoma City one time in a snowstorm coming back from. It must have
I think
been
it was
out
from the
West
Roadster
Coast.
show.
Yeah, Roadster show, and we got stuck in Oklahoma City at a truck stop for probably 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And the only thing there was a Waffle House next door that was walking distance.
So you're good.
Yeah.
Breakfast, lunch,
3 meals a day.
and dinner for 3 days in a row. We would trench through the snow and go there, and there were the other like 3 or 4 locals. Usually Waffle House is full, right? Seldom do you see a Waffle House that there's capacity. So we sat there, and it was the locals, and we ate them out of all their T-bones. Not me and Phil, my dad eats the
Love
shit
him a Waffle
out
House
of it.
T-bone.
I drank all Bert's, Alice's sweet tea. Ate all of Bert's chili.
Yep.
Each time we'd come, it'd be like the menu. Oh well, we're out of chicken breast. We're out of this. We're out of bacon. Oh, we're out of T-bones. We're out of hash browns.
There's nothing left
Yeah.
but lettuce.
Yeah, we ran them dry, dude. Ran them dry.
Always waffles though, wasn't there?
There were.
Yeah.
Always waffles. So that was an interesting experience. I've also been to the northernmost and the southernmost Waffle House in the same week. Northernmost is Indianapolis. Southernmost is Key
I think they
West.
run around
Key
a
West.
little more. We found that on the map the
Yeah,
other
that
day.
may have been at the time.
At the
At the
time,
time,
it was.
Yeah.
So that's
And Key West Waffle House, the southernmost.
I've never been to the Key
But-
West one.
I'll tell you one thing. When I walk into the Waffle House, I just walk in, I sit down, I wait for him to give me my menu. I order I double smothered, covered, scattered. Like I know the lingo, but I don't walk in there and command the respect like old Josh does. I like to bust Josh's balls, right? Clearly.
Yeah.
Really?
I don't
Right.
give you a lot of wins.
No,
Right?
no. You got to earn
I've
them.
never been so impressed, probably with anybody in my life. It's probably I hold you in such high regards
At Waffle House.
at Waffle House that I'm like, hey, where should I sit? Like, should I? How do you?
What
want
do
me
I
to
do?
sit?
How do I hold my
Right?
fork?
Because Josh walks in. That's like hanging with the cool guys. You go
It's,
to Waffle House with Josh.
It's been years and years of training with that, but I'll run through some tips real quick. My recommendation is always the All-Star Special. Get your eggs however you want to get your eggs, no problem. But when you get your hash browns, go ahead and order a double, and you're going to want to get that with, for sure, chili. I'm not going to do all of the lingo because non-Waffle House people aren't going to understand it.
Bird's chili.
It's Bert's chili, right?
Of course.
Right, and then you're going to want cheese, right? Then you're going to want onions, and you're going to want jalapeno peppers. That's the thing you want. You want jalapenos, you want chili, you want onions, and you want cheese
So that's
on your hash
smothered,
browns.
covered, and diced.
Smothered,
Caps,
Oh.
mushrooms.
topped as
okay.
much. Yeah. So that's what you're going to order. And the All-Star Special comes with a waffle. When you order all that, you're going to tell them you want your waffle light and you want them to hold it till the end. Don't worry, she'll know what you mean, right? What that means is you want the waffle not all the way done, but they're not going to drop that waffle until you're almost finished with your food. You're going to get that waffle for dessert. End of story. Not going to go into it any further. If you can't follow those directions, you shouldn't be eating at Waffle House anyway. Number 2, you're eating there a lot. You want to try something different? I will promise you'll be surprised at the T-bone. Try the T-bone. T-bone's good. T-bone's not like your big, thick, rare steak.
It's like
T-bone's going to come how the T-bone comes.
It's like a little sliver of gyros.
Right,
It's
but
like
the turkey,
borderline beef jerky.
Yeah.
but the T-bone's pretty good. Going to go ahead and try the sweet tea. You've got yourself a 50-50 shot, right? Order the sweet tea. If you taste it and it tastes like dish soap, send it back, get a Coke, get something else to drink. If the sweet tea's good, it's great. If the sweet tea's bad, it's the worst thing you've ever tasted.
I gotta chime in on the sweet tea, man. Old Alice has a sweet tooth.
Yeah,
Right.
she likes the sugar.
She likes the sugar. So order the sweet tea and order yourself water. You've got to stomach about a quarter of the sweet tea and then cut it with some water.
Whoa,
that
whoa,
is-
whoa.
No,
That's
that
some
is-
northern tips
Well,
that you got going there.
you
The
know.
southern folks ain't never had
some
no
Yankee
sweet
shit.
tea that's too sweet.
The sweetest of the sweet teas.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only problem
For
is
you northern folks, then do as I do.
Cut it a little bit with some
Right,
water. Don't ever get the salad. Ever.
Not even if there's a fire.
Ever. Don't ever get the salad. Always get the waffle light.
What's the etiquette for ordering? How polite do you need to be?
Is it like a yes, excuse me, ma'am? May I have a
No, you just treat
say it
them.
with your chest? Or what?
You're going to respect them more by ordering what you want, how you want it. That's it. You don't have to be a dickhead about it. You don't have to be super nice. This isn't fine dining, right?
So look, Josh, you're taking a lot for granted because you are a advanced Waffle House goer. But for your guy it's his first time at the Waffle House, and that waffle shows up and it has that little plastic sealed ramekin of unknown substance.
That's
sitting-
butter. Oh yeah, it's butter.
Yeah,
Right.
but some people might be like, "Oh, I don't butter. I don't need butter."
Oh yeah, you're gonna have to if you don't spread the butter on your fucking waffle, then you're ruining it, right? Put the waffle on the butter.
The butter
And put the butter on the waffle.
You're glazing over that because the butter is a secret sauce.
Well,
That
yeah,
waffle-
and you've got to get the
the
thing
Waffle
of
House butter is something special.
the Waffle House butter.
It's the only butter that I think a male can spread.
Yeah,
you used.
That's
Yeah,
a good point.
it's 100%. And
Traditionally, you get yourself like a sliver of just butter, like off the
You're
stick of butter.
fucking up a waffle.
You
horribly.
would destroy that waffle.
here's a little bit of insight.
Go ahead.
Traditionally, people order their food, the waffle comes, right? The waffle's going to sit there. Some, if you're slightly advanced, no, you're not going to eat your waffle till you're done. So you're going to go ahead and throw that packet of butter underneath the waffle, right?
In its container.
In its container, and it's going to get warm, right? So when you get time to eat your waffle, it's already, it's broken down. It's a little bit easier to spread. However, once you've listened to the Oil and Whiskey podcast and you've learned Josh's tips, you're not going to get that waffle until you're ready to eat that waffle. You've finished your food. Waffle time is dessert time. Now it's time. So when that thing comes, it's already piping hot.
How does it come though? It just comes.
So
They just know when to bring it.
hey, drop it.
Go ahead, and drop that waffle.
Go ahead and drop that waffle. If she's good, if you're one of the fine Waffle House waitresses that's paying attention, and you've already been told to do it light, and you've been told to hold it to the end, she knows exactly how many minutes it's going to take for the last final bites, and she drops it, and she's bringing it at your last bite. That's when you know you've got something special, and that's when that lady gets a nice 35 to 40% tip because she's done her job. When you get that thing piping hot and it's just a little bit underdone in the middle, all you got to do is open that packet, spread that butter evenly, and a little bit of butter goes into each one of those little squares and melts instantly. Then cut it like a pizza.
Okay.
This is my tips. Everybody does it different.
That's what I was going to ask.
I cut it.
Don't cut it with the parting lines of the waffle then?
Yeah, I do. So the
you cut it into
waffle comes,
triangles.
I cut it into 4 triangles. After I spread the butter, I cut it into 4 triangles and I spread it apart. Then I do some syrup on 1 slice of pizza, 1 slice of waffle. And I just barely fill the little squares with some syrup. I eat that, repeat, right? I don't want the syrup to be in all the other 3 pieces while I'm eating this piece.
Okay.
That's just That's my
I'm with you.
that's my individual. I don't want that thing to be soggy. I want to dip my waffle in a little syrup, not have a syrup soaked waffle.
You heard it from the pro.
That's where the taste, that's where everything's changed, because you could just have some dough soaked with syrup, or you could have a perfectly slightly undercooked waffle with a little syrup on top.
Out of the horse's mouth.
And I think that's enough of the Waffle House tips. And now I'm fucking starving.
Yeah.
How far is it to Indianapolis? We could get there tonight. Back. Next up, what is the most gimmicky EDC trend? Everyday carry trend.
I think the term EDC.
Could be.
Yeah, it could be.
I just keep a knife in my pocket and that's it.
Yeah, I don't EDC things. I just put the things that I need in my pocket every day.
Me personally, I think that the little two-fingered punch tools are some cool to look at, but the two-fingered brass knuckles and all different types of
keychain with a screwdriver bit
and that's cool. But I think that's very gimmicky of how many guys need a little piece of brass with two finger holes in it to
feel like
punch.
If you're purchasing anything for the sake of putting it in your pocket, it just isn't something that you're buying because you're gonna use it every day. Then it's gimmicky.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an answer. What about the 57 twin
turbo?
Yeah, I would assume it means turbo, but I'm reading the question.
I didn't want you to get started up on the typography.
Oh. What about that 57 twin your team is working on? What kind of power is it going to make?
Guess is as good as mine.
What size turbos are on that?
They're 66s.
You want to do away with the lag, right? You want something a little bit more, a little more peppy.
Jake's going to chime in and be like, they're not 67s.
They're sub 70s.
Yeah. So, smaller turbos, but the customer supplied the motor. A great customer. It's be the third vehicle that we're doing for him. So he gave us the long block. I think Wagner spec'd out some precision turbos for it. A really bitchin' intake for it. Should be a super functional, usable car. But it's
little less about top horsepower, like making big
it'll make
numbers.
It's going to make 1,000 to the wheels. You're making 1,000 to the wheels.
Don't know how much higher, but good baseline number.
Yep.
Faux digits.
Yeah.
Who has been your favorite podcast interview so far?
That's a tough one to say. I don't think I could pick a favorite. We've had
some, like which one of your kids is your favorite? Yeah. They're all special.
Hey, we've had some awesome people. Like honestly, Rod Emory, that was the dude we were really looking forward to, and he did not disappoint. Guy we've admired. He's got a super interesting business and product line. That was awesome, right? Rod's super fucking cool. Paul Senior was unexpected.
Yeah,
unexpected badass. Paul,
surprising. Most surprising.
Not what you thought going into it.
Most down to earth. I mean, Eddie Altman.
Yeah,
awesome fucking dude, man. Crazy stories. Dell done so much cool stuff. Every one of them. There hasn't been a bad one yet where I'm like,
no,
that sucked. A lot of very cool people.
I mean,
we schedule these things, so it's not like we're gonna. Yeah.
Well, I think it's less about what is the favorite, more so as the statement of, I have been surprised so many times on how good they actually were in all different ways. Like you said, the Paul Tuttle one. I mean, it came away from that one with a completely different outlook and respect for the man. Alan Johnson, always had a great time with him, respected him. He's generally a quiet dude.
Yeah, that was shocking. The amount of
it was shocking how fun that was for him to open up and get after it. I was shocked at Bob Johnson, where we had to do very little editing, in that one. And I guess that's, forget the favorite part of it. I apologize to this guy. We can't answer his question that way, but I guess every single time I'm shocked I guess in a good way of it's better than we anticipated them being, no matter what they are.
It's cool learning all the backstories and stuff that you didn't know, and either how well we can relate to a lot of that stuff or how well you're just blown away by some of these awesome stories that
Right.
you had no idea were out there that we get to kind of bring out of some of these guys, and they get a platform to talk about it. And
Yeah, we
you
get
learn a lot from everybody.
messages all the time from guys in shops and of all different industries, but predominantly in our industry that are complimenting the podcast and telling us how well they like it and how much fuel it adds to their fire. But I got to say, it adds the same fuel to our fire. When we get done with like doing these and having this conversation with
Yeah,
it, it's kind of like, oh yeah,
some of them are super motivational.
yeah,
But I'd say for listeners out there, shoot us some ideas. Who do you think would be
yeah,
awesome? We don't get a lot of that, do we? We a little bit here and there.
yeah. There's
Some
not a lot
people
of suggestions
giving
of
us some ideas, but give us some suggestions. Who would you want to hear? Who's maybe like not like your go-to guy? Who's a little bit outside the industry? What would be super interesting?
yeah. Let us know. Next up, when I'm going to read this as it's written. When we building a 62 to 65 shoebox Nova, boys? Question mark.
We build one right now. We just firing back in the same
Oh.
way it was written. Sorry.
A 62 to 65.
Have one
Oh, yeah.
coming up. The white, it's a 63, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Original paint survivor. Going on a spec chassis, Wagner supercharged LS3.
Yeah. I think he's doing a 416 2.9 Whipple
Ooh,
on that.
Keeping
sh-
it underneath the flat hood.
little outlaw style, huh?
Yeah,
Little
you'd be shocked.
big horsepower.
Believe it or not, we've got that sucker stuffed beneath that little low hood line. A lot of cool stuff going on in that one. That spec chassis is a new product, and it is
That's gonna be a fun one.
it
Yeah.
just works so well for packaging things and that. We struggle to fit that underneath some big cars, and that's stuffed underneath that hood. Killer ride height, right wheel and tire, and that car is that wasn't one that he wanted to paint, right? Because that thing is
No,
so nice.
Rusty wanted to paint the green one.
Right,
We
right,
told him
right.
that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, this is
I was taking this one a different way. I was wondering, I don't know this guy's name. I'll have to go back and look, but maybe he was wanting to build one because he's saying
when
when we're going to build one.
Well,
Send it.
Well, we can
Yep.
build two.
Man, we can absolutely.
Second one's always a little bit easier to build than the first, so
Yeah, that
send it.
little high HP's small wheelbase Nova. That's gonna be fun for sure.
Absolutely.
Next up, what is the towing capacity of the C10 chassis? Followed up with another question that I've seen we haven't answered yet. What is one of the stupidest questions you've had about a chassis? You know what?
What are you towing?
Use your best
Yeah,
judgment.
what are you towing with it?
You can't
honestly?
you can't tow a car. All right.
Yeah, don't tow a car.
Yeah, we don't engineer these things for towing. It's meant to be a street ride performance chassis.
If you call us up and say, "Hey, I'm building this truck to tow this," talk to us. Talk to the sales guys. We'll look at the engineers and all that, and we'll figure it out
We've done
if it can be done.
We've done some stuff with some hitches on it, and it's generally to tow a motorcycle, some
Little
wheels
pop-up
and
camper trailer.
or some wheels and tires for like a drag week type thing. But
If you've
That's-
purchased a spec chassis, if you purchased a chassis for your C10, you've got it and you're building, and you're asking us what the towing capacity is for it,
0.
no, just no. If you want to build something with a towing capacity, let us know and we can do that.
Sure. What's the next question?
Next question. What are the chances of you guys producing a chassis for the 99 to 06 Silverado trucks?
Do those trucks need a chassis yet?
If a guy wants to pay for one, absolutely.
Some guys, those are
I
like
guess-
pretty common turbo trucks. Guys like the turbos.
Yeah, that or all the way on the rocker, shave the rocker, lay it on the doors, and fit. It's a 30-inch tall fender, and they want to fit a 33-inch overall diameter tire.
Yeah, I don't see it being there just yet for us. The OBS stuff is just kind of getting popular. Just getting ready to release our spec chassis offering for the OBS stuff, which I think will be really good. And I think the OBS that's got a long run before we start diving into the 99 to 06 stuff.
Generally, any of our products is due to number one, demand, number two, to solve a problem. If the demand's not there and we're not solving a problem, we're probably not looking at it right now.
If you've got a 99 to 06 Silverado and you have some wild idea, something that requires a chassis for it,
Call
give
us
a
up.
shout. We'll do it.
We'll build a chassis for anything.
If your mom's house needs a chassis, we'll build a chassis for it. No?
I mean,
I mean,
yeah.
that's a foundation, right?
Yeah.
What's
It
towing?
depends.
I guess
It
it
depends.
depends.
What's the towing capacity of that?
It was still
And I'm glad that's the last question. Well, thanks for listening to the Oil and Whiskey Podcast with the Roadster Shop, an Ironclad original. Thanks again to our guest, Rod Emory. It was great. We'll see you again next week.